All right. Okay. So now we're entering the last two sections of the book, the God's response, finally, and then this anticlimactic epilogue, right? As was it Holevas who mentioned that? Who mentioned the anticlimactic epilogue? I forgot. No, who was it? Anybody remember? Who mentioned that the epilogue was anticlimactic? Ah, yes, Kestenbaum, thank you. Yes, and we'll go to the anticlimactic epilogue. Very good. Okay, so let's begin I'm going to begin by a question on this section. You all read the response, right? God's response, which starts 79, right? He's called here the unnameable. This is God, right? So God responds to Job from 79 to 91. So I want to get, we're going to take a poll, right? How many of you, I'm going to put gallery view, how many of you thought that was a good response? You were satisfied with the response. Just put your hand there. How many of you thought it was you? You were like, yeah, that makes sense. I'm good now. We good. No, that's nobody? One person. Khan, yes. Who else? That's it. The rest of you, please turn on your face. Okay, how many of you were not satisfied with the response? Put your hand out. Okay, one. So we have, who are you? Wait, I don't know. I don't. I can't see some of your names. Okay, so let me ask again. Sorry. How many of you didn't like the response that God gave? Okay, one. That's it. Just one, two. The rest of you, three. Okay, four. Okay, so a lot of five. Okay, a lot of you didn't. All right. So we'll start with you. Okay, let's begin. Why do you think that God's response was not enough, not acceptable? Let's hear some of your comments.
I personally feel like God didn't owe him a response. Just going back to the idea of like him being like the idea of like integrity and stuff like that. I didn't feel like he really showed, I guess, like integrity. I feel like I don't know, like I feel like he was kind of selfish, and I feel like God didn't need to explain anything to him. Like I had a very different view on the book, honestly speaking. Like I thought he was very selfish, and he used God and took everything that God gave him for granted.
Excellent. By the way, I'm giving one interpretation in this class, but this book is multi-layered. So Cancino has a different interpretation, which actually also works, right? What she's hinting at, that Job is selfish. Some of the ancient rabbis actually made the same argument. They're like who does that? Job is way too sure of himself, right? They say, who can say that he's blameless, right? So a lot of the rabbis agree with you, Cancino, actually, and they find Job to be unsufferable. Right? So yes, so I'm giving one line of interpretation, but definitely there is room for other ways of interpreting this, right? This is a very rich work, right? So Cancino, continue, you're fine, you're doing good, and you have good textual basis for what you're saying, so that works too. I agree. Very good. So yeah, God didn't owe him an explanation. That's certainly one way of putting it, yet he gives an explanation. So, or does he? Right? So so the rest of you who didn't like the response, why not? They were like,
I think I didn't like the response because it felt like, well, there's nothing I can do, like Job could do, or that God can do to change how the universe is set up. So I think it was to me, the response that God gave him was that, one, there's a million other things that I have to take care of in the universe and not just what's happening to you. And second, if you think that you're capable of doing this, and speak up and say that you think you can do my job better than I can. Mm-hmm. And third, I didn't create the universe so that suffering wouldn't exist in what he created. He created the universe, and in the universe there's suffering in it. He never intended to create a universe with no suffering.
Very good.
So I think the only reason why I would say, okay, I don't like that as a response, is because I like it and I don't like it, because it kind of forces you to just have faith and believe that sooner or later God will listen to your prayers. But I think it depends on where you are in your life with how you interpret the book, because I've read it before when I was younger and it angered me more. And I didn't want to take that as a response. But now reading it again, I can understand that, you know, one, humans don't have the capacity to understand or question God, because that we just don't have the capacity to do that. But and I think that the response, I still kind of don't like it, just because of how anticlimactic the ending was. You know, like, why didn't Job say, why did my children have to suffer? You know, why did you take away my children? Like, how can he have a bunch of new children? Why isn't he like in pain for the family that he lost? And why were his children taken away and not his wife?
Yes.
Like, because his wife told him, like, if I was you, I'd be cursing, you know, the day that I was born. So it's murky, but I can see both sides.
Okay, excellent. This is such a good summary of the Nope team. I wrote them down. Please, everybody, write down what De La Torre was saying. Excellent art. Number one, God seems to be saying to Job, I have other things to do, right? In other words, you're not important, right? The world is like, you just a speck. Who do you think you are standing up here making a big fuss, right? Do you think you're the center of the universe? No. Right, let me put you back in your place, right? So on the one hand, right, this is all one actually. God is putting Job back in his place, right? Telling him, you're not important. Number two, and we're going to look at that, right? God seems to be saying, and that will actually play in positively, actually, but your suffering is part of life. So accept it. That's the implicit view, right? Just accept your suffering as part of life, submit to the cosmic order, right? So that's number two, which is also unacceptable, right? And finally, who are you to question God? Yes, we have been, Simone, in the dialogue part for a long time now. we did the dialogues between Job and his friends, and now we're with God, right? So last point, right? Who are you to question God, as though God is, and he says it actually, who is this, right? Page 79, whose ignorant words smear my design with darkness, right? So God is saying, who do you think you are asking questions? So now, so I hope you got all these points, right? These are all saying that, you know, these are all seems to be the way God answers, saying you're not important, stop thinking you're the center of the universe. Suffering is part of life, suck it up. That's number two. And number three, don't question, you're nothing, right? Okay, so it seems to be certainly, that's the sense, that's the feeling we get, right? When we're reading this passage. Anybody want to add to it before we get into alternative interpretation?
I guess mine is an alternative, so never mind. I had like another different view. So
okay, very good. Okay, so let me then ask this: how many of you, those who like the answer, why? Let's hear you on that point. So Cancino, you can go now.
Oh, it was just like different entirely. Because I know I spoke about this with my group as far as like the reasoning. I mean, or like as far as like their conversation. Like Job was just like, oh, like why me, and stuff like that. And it's just like one of the reasons why I didn't like that is because his question overall was just like, why me, and why are you doing this? Instead of like, what is the lesson I'm learning from this? You know? So Job just continued. That's why I thought he was selfish, because he's not asking like, hey, like, what am I supposed to get from this? You know what I'm saying? Like, how do I build up the trust between you and I? Like, tell me, what am I supposed to get from this so I can be a better person?
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. He's just like, why me? I'm so good. And that's why I felt like his good wasn't genuine, because he was only being good so that way God can continue blessing him with what he's been giving him.
Okay, very good. You fit right with the same interpretation, because basically these things that De La Torre was saying, it seems like Job needed to hear them, right? Job is still acting the whole time like he's the center of the universe, right? And he's very selfish, and he's not thinking what he can learn about this, and he's not really wanting to grow, right? So in a way, this answer, kind of rough answer, like, you know, you're not important, you're not the center of the universe, suffering is part of life, hello, where have you been, and stop questioning, right? So in a way, he deserved it. So yes, that's certainly one way that works. It fits with the text. I'm going to give a different interpretation, but Cancino and De La Torre, yours work very well too. Y'all can choose at the end which one, which layer you want to take, right? So excellent. Okay, so I hope everybody got this first wave of interpretations, right? This is well-deserved, right? God's harshness to Job and the way he puts him back in his place is well-deserved, because Job does seem to act like he's the center of the universe. I mean, did Job speak up when other people were suffering? I mean, does he make such a big fuss when his, you know, about the inequalities, about poverty? No, he starts to make a fuss when it happens to him, right? You don't see Job protesting in the streets when it's not him. But when it hits home, now Job is like, wait a second, why am I suffering? Right? So okay, y'all suffering out here, but why am I suffering? So now you really do have an issue, right? So that first layer of interpretation works very well. Okay, so now what I'm going to propose, in addition to this, by the way, those of you who wrote this, you're in good company. A lot of commentators are giving this interpretation, right? This is very good reading of the text. What I'm going to do now is give you a different interpretation, which you can put the two together, it can still work, right? What we're going to do now is try to see how God's response, we're going to see kind of some of the deeper layers of God's response. Okay, so let me say that again so you can write it down. We're going to look right now at the deeper layers of God's response, but for that, we need to read between the lines. Okay, so this is the part, by the way, I want you to listen very carefully, because this part, nobody ever gets it. So I've been teaching this section for like 10 years. And when I look at the exam answers, no one ever gets what I'm trying to say. So I'm going to try again today and say this the best I can, because what the interpretation I'm going to give is subtle. It's a reading between the lines. So I'm gonna try and drag you into this with me and see if you get it. So are everybody paying attention? Let me put you on gallery. All your faces are good. You're alert. You had a drink of water. You have oxygen in your mind. Okay. So let's try and do this. So first of all, I want to address the tone of God, right? A lot of you, so first of all, I'm going to look at the tone, and then I'm going to look at the contents of what he's saying. So there's something already in the tone that I think a lot of you are uncomfortable with the tone. At least when I teach it also in other classes, students say, well, why is he so harsh? Why? I mean, Job has just lost his whole family. He's lost his whole wealth. Why is God so harsh to him? Why is he crushing him, right? So I want to address that, right? I mean, look at the beginning, right? When he's saying, page 79, are you there? Page 79, say yes. Who's there?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
He begins, right? I mean, Job has just, his life has ended, basically. And God arrives, and instead of being like, oh, poor baby, let me give you a hug, right? I mean, that would be nice, right? If your life is in tatters, like, it would be nice if God could be a little more delicate, right? But instead, he begins and starts to bellow. Who is this, right? What the hell? Like, who the hell are you, right? Whose ignorant words smear my design with darkness. Stand up now like a man. I will question you. Please instruct me. Is dripping with sarcasm, right? He's being sarcastic. Is this the right time to be sarcastic, right? So a lot of students get really hung up on the tone. Like, why is God being so condescending, right? Sarcastic. So I want to talk a little bit about that, and I want you to understand the culture. In order to understand the tone of God here, you have to understand the culture. The Middle East, the closest you'll come to that culture here in the States is hip hop culture. Okay, anything that's going on in hip hop, that will connect to the way the Middle East functions. So let me explain. How many of you have witnessed, even not live, but on TV like me, a rap battle? Rap battle? Okay, a few of you. Okay, Me, my only one is Eminem with in 5 Mile. Okay, sorry. That's all. That's the limits of my hip hop culture, right? So you can see. So rap battle. So what? Let's remember how a rap battle works, right? You have first rapper. He's like, yo, you know, he comes out, does his thing, tears down the other person, right? The other person is cool, is chill, is just waiting, right, until his turn comes and blah, he destroys. And now, as they're destroying each other, is it a big deal? Should we call the cops as they're destroying each other? What do you think?
No.
What are they doing?
It's a contest.
Okay, they're measuring up.
Challenge.
They're competing. It's a kind of like, let me see how far, let me test you and see how far you can go, how much of a man you are. Let's see how you.
Okay.
In a way, there's a kind of joyfulness to it, right? There's a kind of energy. Yes.
So and I was thinking this before, but I wasn't sure which part it would align with versus favorable or unfavorable. But it seems like in his response to Job, he's kind of swinging his weight around.
Yeah, and he's expecting him to respond.
Yeah, he's expecting him to kind of challenge him back. So that's why I thought, at least when he was talking about, saying that you're kind of nothing, you're worthless, you're a speck of dust, he's kind of like, I mean, he says all this, but he's talking to Job. He's granting Job the grace of kind of witnessing God, whereas his friends are witnessing. Well, I guess towards the prologue they will. I mean, the epilogue they will. But Job is the first one to encounter it, and it's by virtue of him directly challenging God's granting, him giving him the suffering.
Exactly, right? Job has challenged God. He's done his lines, right? And now God comes on the scene and is like, oh, you want to do this? Let's do this. Let's go, right? God is responding and he's saying, oh, you want to, let's go. Let's do this. Let's go outside. Right? And you look at how he talks to him, stand up like a man. I mean, this is powerful. He's saying, let's do this. Let's have this conversation. Let's do this duel. Let's do this battle, right? Stand up like a man. I will question you. Please instruct, right? This is a challenge. And in a way, it's a powerful challenge where God is basically saying to Job, get up, right? There is something, we'll talk again about this notion of get up, right? That God tells Job, but you have to see it in this context. God has been challenged and he has accepted the challenge almost joyfully. He's like, all right, you want to do this? Let's do this. Let's go, right? That's where we are. We are in hip hop culture. This is not, afternoon tea, where you're in a nice living room and everybody's saying politically correct things, right? You are here in the Middle East. You are here in hip hop as the closest in America to what's going on over here, right? So does that help a little bit understand the tone? Are you guys seeing a little bit more why he talks like that? Are we clear? Say yes, no?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Rodriguez. All right. So now we have to get into the content. Now this is the hard part, right? This first part people get more or less, but this second part is like, okay, because very subtle. What we're going to do is read between the lines. God is saying a bunch of stuff, but God is also, make sure you write this down, creating an atmosphere, right? He's painting a landscape, right? And in this painting, in all of the vivid images that God is drawing, right? In this big, what do you call this? A big canvas, right? You are getting subtly a vision of who God really is. Okay, let me say it again. This is what's going on. It's like God is sitting in front of a huge canvas, right? And he's throwing paints and he's saying, there's this, there's that. And he's like painting a picture of life. Right? He's talking about life. He's talking about animals, landscapes, water, earth, mountains. So it's like God is sitting in front of standing in front of a huge canvas and he's painting, right? Now, as he's painting this picture of creation, right? All of creation, you get a sense as you're watching this painting, you don't see God, right? He's not painting himself. It's not a self-portrait. But as you see, just like when you see a painting of an artist, you can tell a lot about who they are. Right there in this painting, you can tell a lot about who God is. Is that point clear? Because if you don't get this one, you're going to lose. Am I very clear on that? Let me get the gallery view because I need you to be clear on this. Does everybody understand what God is doing? He's painting on a canvas, and as we observe, as we see the finished picture, as we enter into this world that God is kind of, creating through this poetry, we get a sense, we can catch a glimpse of who God really is. How many understand what I'm saying right now? Okay, how many don't understand what I just said? Or what? What are you saying? Okay, so if we're clear on this, then we can move on, because that's the part which I can never explain what. So before we get to the painting that God is doing, let's go back to the prologue and let's make a list of who God used to look like in the eyes of Job, because here Job is going to have a revelation in God's discourse. Something will open up, right? And Job is going to see. He says himself, right? My ears had heard, but now my eyes have seen you. What did he see? We're going to talk about that in a second. First, let's go back to the prologue and let's make a list. There are 3 main points I'm going to look at in who God is in the prologue. So let's do this together. Give me 3 attributes of God as perceived by by Job in the prologue, by the prologue Job. Let's go back together. So let's go to the prologue, which is on page 5, right? Let me read a few passages to help you, right? So let's look at the second paragraph, especially there you get a clear vision of how Job, who Job thinks God is, right? Every year, it says, his sons would hold a great banquet in the house of each of them in turn, and they would invite their sisters. When the week of celebration was over, what would Job do? What's his reaction to this partying that his kids are doing?
He purifies them.
Okay, why? They're just partying. Why are you purifying them? Okay, Job is nervous. Maybe they will have sinned. Let me purify them, because otherwise, what would happen? Maybe then God will, zap them out of reality, right? So now, just this paragraph gives you a vision, gives you a sense of who God is for Job. How would you describe the God of the prologue? What do you see there? I'm going to type up what you say. What kind of God do we have here? What kind of God does Job see in the prologue?
I think he sees God like he works on a reward system.
Yes, very good. So
right?
Number 1, right? We have a God who is predictable. Predictable God. In other words, he's a God that there's a system, right? If I do this, he'll do that. If I do this, he'll do that. If I purify my children, they won't die, right? So there's this kind of cause and effect, like God is a, cosmic vending machine. If I put the right coins, I will get the right product, right? A kind of very predictable God, right? Very good. What else do we see? How else would you describe the God of the prologue? So I wrote down, you're reading in the chat, right? What I'm writing. Okay, how else, what other characteristic of God do we see in the prologue? Is this a God you could have fun with? Does this God like parties? What's your sense you're getting? Does God enjoy when people have a big party based on this page 5?
Not according to Job.
No, exactly. According to Job, it's like, oh my God, they're having a party. Things will be out of control. That's what happens at parties, right? He says they will get drunk, or, they will sin and curse, right? Parties, what makes a party is that things can get out of control. And Job is horrified. He thinks God will not like this. So second element, right? Number 2, we have a rigid, controlling, rigid, narrow-minded God, right? That's the second attribute that we see in the prologue, right? And the third one, I'll just give it to you. Well, maybe I can ask you, is Job afraid of God in the prologue? Do you get the sense that he's afraid of God? Also, in addition to seeing him as a vending machine? What do you think?
Yes, he wouldn't purify his children or,
Exactly.
offer if he wasn't afraid of God, right?
Yeah, he's afraid of God because for Job, God, and in fact, the whole time when Job is blaming God for his suffering, what is he saying? God is capable of bringing death and suffering, right? he sees God as someone who can destroy him, right? And or destroy his children. And you know what? It's like one of those self-fulfillment prophecies. That's what happens, right? Or at least in his perception, right? So you all jotted down, right? These three is important because I'm going to respond to all three. Everybody sees in the chat what I wrote: predictable God, rigid, narrow-minded God, and a God which is death-giving, right? Everybody sees it? Say yes if you see it. I want to make sure you're following with me. Everybody sees my chat? Yes?
Yes.
Okay, very good. All right. So now let's go into this big painting, right? Let's go into the God's speech. Let's remember, God is there and everybody is silent. God has you have to imagine it. God has a huge canvas and on it he's like painting, the moon, the earth, the water, the animals, the mountains, right? Let me read you a section randomly, right? Let's see, let me find it. Where is it? Okay, here, right? And what I want you to do as I'm reading, I want you to write down emotions that that you're feeling as you're watching this painting come to life. Okay, are you ready? I'm going to read randomly, and I want you to write down what emotions, what feelings are coming up in you as I'm reading this. What are you feeling as you're watching this landscape? Right? Okay, I'm reading randomly from. You don't need to follow. It's pretty much anything. Page 80. I'm starting right. Have you walked through the depths of the ocean or dived to the floor of the sea? Have you stood at the gates of doom or looked through the gates of death? Have you seen to the edge of the universe? Can you tie the twins together? Can you light the evening star? Can you tell the antelope to calve or ease her when she's in labor? Who unties the wild donkey and lets him wander at will? He ranges the open prairie and roams across the salt lands. Is the wild ox willing to serve you? Will he spend the night in your stable? Do you deck the ostrich with wings, with elegant plumes and feathers? Do you give the horse his strength? Okay. Are you feeling it? Are you getting the picture? Let's write a list of the feelings you're having, and then I'll put them all together. What's the sense you're getting as you're hearing and reading and watching this landscape? What are some of the feelings you have?
I guess inexperienced and small.
That's the feeling, or you're
like in regard, like if I'm thinking
Job.
about it inwardly, yeah. Like if
okay,
I'm
no, don't think of Job. Don't think of how you're feeling. Think of think of the how do I explain? Think of how would you describe the what you're seeing? Let's put it like that. How would you describe what you're seeing?
Like divine.
Okay, sure, divine. Why do you say that?
Because you kind of get like a feeling like, oh, like let's say if like I'm hearing that, right? I feel like I'm at the top of the universe, like nothing can hurt me right now. If I'm like,
oh, okay, top of the universe, nothing can hurt me. Okay, I'm putting that. What else? Good. Yes, you get a feeling of elation, right? I think I would call it like that. It's a feeling of, and if everybody understands feeling of elation, elation is when you're feeling like really high, right? You feel a bit high, in a healthy sort of way. Okay, what else? Rodriguez, I think you were talking. Oh, it was you. Yes.
Yeah, it was. I think I would feel like I'm feeling small, like the universe is very big.
Okay, so you're seeing space, right?
Yeah.
Remember, don't think yourself how you're feeling. Just what are you? How would you describe, right? What words would you use? So your spaciousness, right? I like that. Breadth. These are very good, very good. What else? So you're describing the painting, not how you're feeling in the presence of the painting. What does the painting? What are some of what? How would you describe the painting? Yes.
God is
what?
portraying a mystery.
Okay, mysterious. Very good. Out of our reach, right?
Infinite.
What?
Infinite.
Oh, infinite. Yes, infinite. Very good. Again, with the notion of space, right? Very good. You guys are doing great. What else?
Well, like responsible for nature. Like
so natural or wild, right? There's a wildness to the painting. Very good. Just describe the painting. Don't describe yourself. There's a wildness, infinity, space. Anything else? One more point.
And when you say powerful?
Okay, very good. There's an element of powerful. Yes, you can sense there's a lot of power. There's a lot of energy, right, in the painting. Very good, very good. Okay, now, based on this, what can you tell me about God? See if you get it. Based on the painting, right? The way you would describe the painting. How do these words, what do they tell you? What does the painting tell you about God?
Get out! Oh, I'm sorry. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't know this was, I'm so sorry, guys.
We get everything, don't worry. This is the fun part of being on Zoom for a class. So, let me ask the question again, right? So let me put you on gallery view also so I can see you guys, right? You see the list of words that we put, right? What sense are you getting? What can these words tell you about who the painter is, right? We've described the painting. This painting reflects on the painter. Who is the painter based on these words?
Someone that a human being cannot even comprehend.
Okay, mysterious, incomprehensible. I'm trying to write this word. You have wild also, natural, powerful. I'm just writing your words. Is spacious, right? So we have
something transcendent about it.
Yes, transcendent. We are discovering something very, very interesting, right? And I'm gonna now go back to our picture of the prologue and put it in contrast to this landscape, right? So the first point I made had to do with a predictable God, right? How does this landscape that we just saw contradict the notion of a predictable God? What do you think? This is always the hardest part.
It's completely opposite to the predictable God, right?
Explain.
Right? Because if I'm thinking of something predictable, it's like I know precisely what you're going to do, when you're going to do it. You don't, for me, it doesn't elicit any powerfulness or energy. I'm looking at the words energy, wildness, because you're predictable. Again, I'm sorry, I want to use the word vanilla.
Yes, very good. It's okay. Okay, excellent. First thing we see when you read the text, let me read again on page 82. You can see it later when. Do you tell the antelope to calve? Who unties the wild donkey and lets him wander at will? Is the wild ox willing to serve you? There is a wildness in this landscape which speaks to the wildness of God. Okay, let me say that again. There's a wildness to this landscape which speaks, which gives us a glimpse, which testifies to the wildness of the Creator himself, right? So what we're seeing here is that just like the wild ox is not willing to serve Job, God is not willing to serve Job. God is not his puppet that he can just pull some strings and God's going to deliver, right? That's the first thing we see when we see all of these wild animals that Job cannot control. Between the lines, the sense we're getting is God himself is saying something about himself. Just like God is telling Job, I am like those animals. Just like the wild ox cannot serve you and you cannot control the horse and the donkey, you cannot control me. Now, does everybody understand this first point? Do you see what I'm doing? Do you see my methodology? Raise your hand if you're seeing what I'm doing. Okay, not everybody. Okay, not bad. Okay, so yes. So what I'm doing is reading between the lines, right? As I'm seeing this landscape, I'm getting a sense of who God is. That's basically what's happening. So the first sense I get is the wildness of the landscape, the fact that nothing can be controlled in this landscape. So I'm getting the sense that God himself is also wild and cannot be controlled. That's the first lesson that Job is getting as he's seeing this, right? God cannot be controlled. He's not there. And let me elaborate on that a little bit because this is important. Hold on. Enough with this. Yes. First thing we learn, and this is from this idea that God cannot be controlled, that he's not just there to cater to our needs. This is something very important to learn, right? We tend to think of God like that. Like, and when something goes wrong, we're like, Job, why is this happening to me, right? Instead of realizing that God is not just there to, what's the word, cuddle you, right? God is also there to cuddle us, right? But not only. God is also there to challenge us, to push us, to make us feel uneasy and uncomfortable. Why? What would happen if we're never challenged, never pushed, always cuddled? What kind of people do we become?
We'll be like Job in the
beginning.
beginning of the book.
Yes, very good. Wow, okay. It's a meeting of the minds. Very good. Absolutely. Right, what we're seeing, and we should learn this for our own lives, right? We always want God to do good by us, right? We accept the pleasure, but we don't accept the pain. And we don't understand that we need this, right? God is also going to challenge us and put us in difficult, dark, dire circumstances so that we can grow stronger and grow. God is not just the predictable, he's gonna surprise you in horrible ways, right? Also in good ways, obviously, right? God is not just horrible and dark. There's also light and life and so forth. But there are moments where God will put you in situations where you're like, why? And you want to scream, right? So we're learning here that God is not just there to cuddle us, right? God is also there to push us out of our comfort zone, to challenge us. Good. That's the first thing we learn. Second thing. Now, we saw in the prologue a narrow-minded, rigid God who doesn't like parties. What do you see now?
I see color.
Okay, yes, you and your vanilla. Yes, right? We see a God who's like, pow, right? Space, energy, oxygen, freedom, risk, right? It's risky to go to these high places with the wild donkey and the wild ox, and you don't know what they're going to do to you, right? So make sure you write this down. Instead of a narrow, rigid God who is there watching your mistakes and, writing in a big book every single mistake you do, we have a God who seems to not give a damn about our mistakes, right? This is a God who's like, I'm over here. You think I'm over there taking notes? No, I'm soaring in the heavens. I am open. I am free. I am embracing everything, right? I am life. I am the dance of life, right? We see here so much space and oxygen that Job, you go back to the prologue, is such a narrow space where Job is. He's so afraid of making a mistake. He's walking on eggshells all day long, right? And it's as though God is saying, relax, come, enter the dance and the circle of life, right? Don't be afraid to live. Don't be afraid to suffer. Don't be afraid to enjoy and feel pleasure. Don't be afraid to take risks. Don't be afraid to sin, for God's sake. I'm so tired of these people afraid of sinning and staying home all day in this narrow space. Do you see what I'm saying? This is space. This is a God it's as though God is inviting Job and saying, come out of this narrow space and enter the circle of life, right? Come out of this narrow space and stop being afraid of living, of enjoying life, of suffering, of making mistakes, of stumbling around, of having new encounters, new experiences. Enter life. Am I making sense? Does everybody see this?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Right. So this is the second thing we're learning. We are taught by our religions, right? Don't live. Don't make mistakes because you'll suffer. You don't want to suffer. You don't want to make this mistake. God seems to be saying, it's as though God is like screaming. You know how there are some places and moments you want to scream? This is it, right? God is like, right? Stop, right? Everybody just come out. Let's just have a big party, right? Let's just enter life. Let's not be afraid, right? We are taught to be afraid of life. And when we study Nietzsche, by the way, we're going to see that this is one of the main criticisms that Nietzsche has against religion. He's saying religion is anti-life. It's keeping us from living, keeping us from taking risks, keeping us from stumbling, making mistakes, loving, keeping us from learning, right? And so that's what we see here. God, in a way, is very Nietzschean, we're going to see, saying, stop being afraid of life. We need to stop being afraid of life, being afraid of making mistakes, being afraid of taking risks. Why? Because ultimately life is the canvas of God. We don't need to be afraid. That's what we're learning here, right? It's all painted by the Creator. And so there is no space that should be fearful. We should be able to enter freely and courageously. So I see something in the Shach Olivas. Yes, the shift from the 50s to the 60s is exactly what we're having here. I love it, right? The 50s where everybody's wearing, you know, perfect clothes and they have perfect faces, right? And here we have, right? This is where we are. We are in the 60s. God is a hippie. Very good, right? Excellent. So now the third one. Third one is interesting. This is the most important. We saw in the prologue that Job was afraid that God was going to kill his children and kill him too, right? We have a God who is punitive, who can destroy your life, right? What do we have here now? Where did I go? Oh yeah. What do we have? What do you see now in the landscape that God just painted that contradicts the prologue version of God?
You see life, right? He's depicting the full spectrum of life, all the animals, the landscape.
Exactly. And you see so many allusions also to birth, right? The antelope is calving, right? The ostrich has eggs, right? You have so much life bursting. This is like, seriously, if you read this passage and you listen in the background to the circle of life of the Lion King, that's it, right? I want you all tonight to go back home, read this passage and listen to the Lion King's theme song, The Circle of Life, because that is where we are. We are in an explosion of life. And so what God is saying between the lines, like, you thought I was about punishment and death? No, I am life. I am resurrection. I am springtime, right? I am rhythm. I am power. I am energy. And whatever you went through, I am asking you, I am telling you, I am enabling you to stand up now like a man, right? This passage, this is so powerful. The energy of this passage, it's as though it was written to infuse Job with life again, right? This whole beautiful landscape of life is as though God is telling Job, live, right? I am life. Let me resurrect you. Let me breathe life into you again through my words. It's as though God is breathing life into Job again, infusing Job with energy, with power, with life, with rebirth, right? Resurrection, springtime. That's what we have. And so are you seeing, this is such a powerful vision of God, which you will never get if you're sitting in a church pew or, sitting in a mosque or in a synagogue. You will rarely get such a unique vision of God, right? Why? Because most religions have only heard about God. And in this particular text, we have a rare glimpse with Job as to what God really looks like, right? God is open-minded, spacious, inviting us to live. He is wild, unpredictable, challenging us. And finally, he is life, infusing us with ever new life, no matter what we go through, how we are crushed, how deeply, how low we go, how destroyed we become. There is always new life that is offered, right? This is what we're getting, such a rare glimpse, which I have not seen since. The only person who gives me a little bit of this glimpse is Nietzsche, who is an atheist, right? If you read Nietzsche, and the way that he describes how we should live, you get a little bit of that energy. But it's very rare to find a vision like this, again, after the book of Job. In my view, I have a hard time finding such powerful, vivid portrait of who the Creator actually might be and how we have been deluded and lied to as to who the Creator really is. Am I making sense? Did finally a class of mine understand this section? How many of you are seeing what I'm doing? Okay, not everybody. Okay, good. All right. So hopefully in the test, you will show a proper this has never happened. Like I go to the test and I read and I'm like, oh man, nobody understood a word what I said. So maybe hopefully this time it will work. Now, we need to go to the epilogue. So, first of all, any questions about what I said? Any comments or nuances you want to bring to this interpretation? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sorry. Can you just explain? So you said in the prologue, God was like, Job was afraid of God. He was like brings down death and suffering. Can you explain again how he's different here in this passage?
Yeah, sure. Very good question, right? In the prologue, you see how he might be the one to kill his children, right? Here, you have it's not obvious, nothing is said directly, right? But you have, as you watch the landscape, you have such an explosion of life, right? And you have so many births, right? That you get a sense, if we are really seeing in this landscape a vision of God, right? And you see explosion of life in the landscape, that's how you can deduce that God himself is an explosion of life, right? Or God has to do with life. God is connected to life, to rebirth, to new beginnings, and not to punishment, death, and so forth. Am I making sense? Does that make sense? Are you sure? You're good?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, any other clarifications? This is the moment to really clarify this. So at least one class of mine will get this passage. Everyone good? Okay, now let's go to the anticlimax, to this pathetic epilogue. So yes, so we are on page now, page 91. So indeed, right? A lot of you mentioned this. We get to the ending. We had this amazing revelation of God, this epiphany. Job is like, remember what he says right before, right? He says, I had heard of you with my ears, and now my eyes have seen you. This is page 88, right? I had heard you with my ears. Now he has seen God, right? But now on page 91, we get to the ending, and we wish almost the ending hadn't been written. Right? It would have been nice to just finish on this powerful, grandiose landscape. And now we come to the ending, and it's such a pathetic ending. It's like Job is basically back where he started. Look at this. Page 91, second paragraph. Then the Lord returned all Job's possessions and gave him twice as much as he had before. And now all of his relatives, out of the blue, they arrive and they come to celebrate it. They commiserated with him. And as they left, each one gave him a coin and a gold ring. And so the Lord blessed the end of Job's life more than the beginning. He now had 14,000 sheep, 6,000 camels, 1,000. We're back in the beginning. We were supposed to move beyond the beginning. What is happening? Right? What kind of ending is this, right? So yes, you're all getting this idea that if there is going to be a happy ending in the story of Job, it cannot possibly be that he got his possessions back. Are you following? Because if that's what's going on and Job is back to square one, then what was the point of all of the suffering? If nothing has changed, right? I think that was Cancino. If nothing has changed, then what was the point of the whole story, right? So first thing I want to be very clear, if there is a happy ending in Job, it cannot be that he got all his possessions back. And this is a traditional interpretation, right? If you're faithful, if you submit, if you hang on, if you have faith, God will bless you. This cannot be it, right? If the author is writing it, he's writing it and you can sense it's dripping with irony, right? The author is in a way making fun of the way that many of us interpret religion, right? So are you all clear as to how the real happy ending cannot be that he gets his possessions back? Because that would be simply going back to square one as though nothing happened, nothing has changed. It's the same stupid scenario of Job being virtuous so he can get, in the end, some prosperity. Are we good about this not being, how many of you see how this cannot be the right happy ending? Okay, everybody, any questions before we get to the right happy ending? Yes, Cancino.
Just really quickly, from the epilogue and then everything, 3 different parts. I thought that the epilogue and prologue were more real life, and then the middle part was not real. Part of me felt like he kind of dreamt, this was just in a theory, he kind of dreamt it all. or like maybe he has like this revelation during his sleep and realized like, wait, like, you know what I'm saying? Because like even the style of writing kind of took me like, I think maybe I was digging a little too deep into it, where I was thinking like maybe this never really happened and he kind of just woke up and was like, holy smokes, you know what I'm saying? That's why I thought like he only got like, it's not possible. It's a book, so anything's possible. But in reality, it's not possible for your family to come back out of the blue if they're all been taken away, you know? So I was like, maybe this didn't really happen, but he kind of just had like a small revelation because I don't know, you know?
So I like the way, I think it's an interesting reading because it does seem like the way that it comes back like the beginning, it does seem like Job just had a nightmare, right? The whole thing was a nightmare. And I think that's an interesting reading. I kind of like that way of seeing it also. But would not the nightmare have shifted something in Job? I mean, and actually you can see whether it's a nightmare or real, right? There is still something that is different about the epilogue than the prologue. And this is where we can see what the author deems to be the real happy ending. Can anyone see the difference between what we have here in the epilogue and the prologue? There's something more that is added.
I was gonna say, is the author sort of making fun of us like this is a Disney ending?
Yes, exactly. The author is like, you people always wanting happy ending, right? You religious people always thinking that, you know, God gonna like, you know, fix everything for you, right? So he's kind of making fun of that. He's giving a Disney ending, and the way he's writing, it's you can sense how he's very ironic, right? When he says, you know, yeah, just the way that he makes this list, right? Again, like the beginning. So yes, the author is poking fun at Disney endings and the way that many religious people have a Disney approach to religion, right? They always want to see a victory and, and a happy ending, don't we all, right? But if you look a little beyond, after the 4,000 sheep and the yoke of oxen, there's something strange that's going on.
Is the difference between the prologue and the epilogue that he shares his possessions with his children?
Yes, and who exactly? Which children?
His daughters?
Yes, this is strange. This is unheard of. If you know the culture, right, the patriarchal culture of the Hebrew Bible, number one, you don't name the girls. If you go to the whole Hebrew Bible, the only people that matter are the males. They're the ones who have names and who are written up in the genealogies. Here you have the sons are kind of the 7 sons and then 3 daughters, and then zoom on the 3 daughters, they have names. Number one, that's crazy. And number two, they're given an inheritance. Now, this was not allowed in the patriarchal culture. The money goes to the son. And the women, they marry and then they have money with a husband, right? But here, you have very progressive dealing with the woman. She has a name, she has an identity, she has a voice, remember, the name is very powerful in the Hebrew Bible. The name is not just a name. The name indicates that you have a destiny, that you have something to bring to the world, right? The fact that he gives his daughters names, he's saying, my daughters will have a destiny in this world. They will make a difference. They will leave a mark. This is unheard of. Normally only the man leaves a mark. And number two, they have a share in the possessions, which likewise wasn't done, meaning you are now going to have your own share. You can stand on your own 2 feet. You can be independent, self-reliant. Okay, so what is this? So this is a strange detail. Now, what does it tell you about Job that all of a sudden, or Job's transformation, that all of a sudden he's able to see his daughters and give them these privileges? What does this tell you about Job? How is he different? What does this tell you about his shift?
He's not as obsessed with material possession like he was.
Okay, yeah, first of all, he's sharing, which we didn't see before, right? His possessions are being now kind of offered, right? He has learned generosity. That's the first thing. Very good. Let me write it down in the chat, right? First thing that we see here, Job becomes generous. He is sharing rather than hoarding, which was the case before. What else do we see? What else?
I would say that because his perception of God has shifted, and we see that like the thing that he's doing with the daughters is pretty drastically contrasting how you typically practice family dynamics in that culture, that he understands God as kind of unpredictable, and he can have, he can create these different values within
Very
his
good.
family dynamic.
Job is capable of changing the system now.
He
Because
also made a
sorry. Let me just finish, and then so Job is now capable of subverting, right, culture, of bringing something new, right, bringing progress, because of the vision of God he had, right? Very good. Yes, Cancino, go ahead.
I was gonna say, at a point in time, we were talking about how like Joe is a reflection of God when he starts to show his emotion. So him being generous and giving to everyone can also be shown as a reflection of God, because God gives to everyone, just not one particular type of person.
Yes, Job has become more like God. Whereas before, we don't know, he was cardboard. Very good. Anything else that you're seeing that this is telling you? I would add Job has become sensitive to the oppressed, right? The women in this culture, right, patriarchal culture, are usually voiceless. They're usually invisible, right? They have no name, no destiny, no possessions, right? Job, in a way, his vision of the world has broadened to include both genders. He's able to see the invisible, to hear the voiceless, right? Job has developed ethical sensibility, right? Let me write this down. He has developed an ethical sensibility that he didn't have before. Before, he was kind of self-absorbed, right? We have a very self-absorbed Job in the prologue. Now he's seeing the daughters, he's seeing the sons, he's sharing his possessions. Job has been opened. That's what we have, right? The suffering that he went through has cracked him open. And from there, from that crack, from that brokenness, comes a whole new Job: generosity, compassion, sensibility. This is the true happy ending. True happy ending is how the pain that Job went through, how it made him more human, how it made him more compassionate, how it made him more open to the world. Whereas before, he was, like Cancino was saying, self-absorbed, selfish, interested only, hoarding possessions, materialistic. Now the suffering has cracked him open, and out of that brokenness arises a heart, a sensibility, ethics, compassion, openness, right? That is the true happy ending, between the lines, subtle, right, that we have in the book of Job. Does that make sense? Any questions? We good? Okay. Whew. All right. That was crazy. I wanted to say one little announcement, and I can't find my little paper. Oh, yeah. What was my announcement? Oh, yeah. Okay. We're done with Job. Now, please, tomorrow we'll do Maimonides, and we'll talk briefly about the final project. I just want to ask you, I'm shifting a little something. You know how I said the reading assignments, during the week, have them in? Actually, I would like you to hand them in before class so I can read them and grade them then. So I'm going to have them be due before class. And then, so don't, also you need the reading assignment to be able to do your group work, right? So you need to have read and wrestled with the text. So I will now shift it and say, please, the reading assignment is due before class time. So anytime before class time, you put it in the folder, and that will be the actual due date. Any questions on that? Okay. All right, so we conclude. I will see you guys tomorrow.